Yeah, how do you want to start, I guess?
Yeah, we don't have a tradition to start that, to how to start that yet, right? So
Yeah, that's true.
just like keep it simple for now.
Yeah. So I guess we can just start out with this is Ohan's voice.
Yes,
Um,
that's Guilherme here.
and yeah, I guess we're just gonna open up the podcast with a couple of chats about why it is we chose cognitive science and why we think it's a useful lens for looking at society and a lot of things we think about on a day-to-day basis. So I guess we'll just start out by yeah, asking you what made you go into cognitive science.
Yeah, I think the goal could be also tell a little bit about ourselves in general and the relationship between ourselves and cognitive science, and then just like let people know what who we are, who is the people talking here.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can give you a little bit of background on myself as well. So yeah, I'm Brazilian. I'm from São Paulo. I grew up in a neighborhood called Grajaú. Um, and I I went to Europe. I traveled to Europe to live and to learn English first in Ireland and spent some time there. Spent 3 years actually, and then I moved to Portugal to Lisbon to study anthropology. And to this point, I had read um, quite some things on behavior, on some anthropology, some psychology, popular books actually. So a lot of popular books on science, so science divulgation kind of books. And I think that led me to choose anthropology in the first place. I was curious to understand why in every country that we would go, people would behave differently. I think, yeah, like as a teenager or like a young adult, I was fascinated by this Darwinian story, a story that could explain everything. And I would be fascinated that it could not explain everything. And the things that it could not explain, that is the thing that I wanted to have answers for. So I look at anthropology, and it looked like that it was striving to try to understand or to explain why people just behave differently in different places, and what are the causes, and in general, what are the important questions that we could answer with observing how people do the things they do. And yeah, I think it was a great time doing anthropology. I really love it, and I care a lot about it. I really I'm fascinated by the whole story of anthropology, by the whole topic, and I think it's a beautiful discipline. But at a certain point, I found it incomplete for what I was looking for, and I did anthropology, but I did basically a minor in primatology at the time of my bachelor's. So I wanted to still work with primates, and I wanted to answer some other kind of different questions. We can go into those questions a little bit more in detail, but I turned myself to cognitive science for my master's. I did cognitive science, my master's in cognitive science in Vienna, at the University of Vienna, and I follow up with the PhD in cognitive science. And yes, I worked with primates during the master's as well, but also with humans. This is just a little bit of background to explain why I got into cognitive science in a nutshell. But yeah, you can take your turn and tell us a little bit more of how did you get here?
Yeah, and then I have I think a couple of questions about some of the things you said. But I'm from New York, from Queens, and my family are Armenian immigrants, so grew up with a lot of different languages in the house. So that was always a very fascinating thing for me, how people could be interpreting symbols in one way, but somebody who has never had access to those symbols their mind could be locked away from you if you don't know the language. So that was always a very interesting aspect to me, and seeing all the different cultures in Queens and in New York City in general, just interacting, all these different styles of interaction and behavior. And I remember also that when all these thoughts were sort of occurring, I also interestingly had come across, I guess, in a class or something, the idea of JFK's assassination
Mm-hmm.
and the idea that his brains were blown out.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 second he was alive, and the other second bits of his brain were scattered around the car. And even if you assembled all those bits and put it back in, you wouldn't have the person anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the first time I can remember explicitly thinking about the importance of what the brain is and what existing is in general. So that really sort of sent a spark, and that was probably like, I don't know, about 9, 10 or something like that. And then from then on, it was just reading a ton of fiction. So that fiction really got me interested in identity and selfhood and what that might mean. And for undergrad, I ended up studying sort of the mathematics of behavior, basically game theory, and worked in finance for a few years. Did that, and then as a poet, I was like, okay, maybe I should just leave finance, start working on the poetry side of everything. So I left the finance world, left New York, moved around a while, settled in Sri Lanka, moved to a friend's farm, worked on the farm for a while, then was also consulting, and then started a sustainability consultancy in Sri Lanka. And that was an amazing experience, and also a chance to kind of see how people functioning, also be working on something that is really important for the now and very rewarding. But there was a point where I had to be really honest with myself and say, okay, well, if I don't take the chance to study cognition, I'm always going to be disappointed with one core driver of my life. So that's when I applied to a bunch of programs, ended up studying in Istanbul at Boğaziçi University, got my master's in cognitive psychology and cognitive philosophy, working mostly on epistemology, applied epistemics, and also the sort of beliefs and belief dynamics. And then, of course, moved on to the PhD. So, yeah, I mean, I think that studying cognition is an interesting thing because it sits right at this interesting boundary of a lot of the physical aspects of biology, and then all these everything that's extended from it, everything that emerges from it. So I think the human sits at an interesting nexus where up until then there are all the biological agents that make up these very complex systems like humans, and then beyond humans are actually individual agents within this larger system. So society is to humans as the individual cell is to humans, at least analogously. So that aspect always really excited me.
Really cool. Really cool. I think we have to make it clear that actually cognitive science is not a ancient science, right?
Yeah.
It's a kind of
70
like a
years
new
old. Yeah.
enterprise of, as you said, trying to put a lot of different perspectives, like different disciplines together to work on the kind of the same problem. Is it?
Yeah. It's all the different facets of the same problem, and that problem is how the hell is it that human beings do something so radically different from anybody else, from any other living species? I think it's something like not just the ability to perceive information and maintain information about information in what we might call beliefs, but then also to generate information which is novel, I'd say in a sense has degrees of freedom, a certain degree of abstraction from the information perceived. I think that's quite a phenomenal transition that human beings are able to do.
Yeah, I think the key word there is information, right? We are dealing with information as cognitive scientists. Yeah, they're a good branch of cognitive science dealing with consciousness. Do you think that's also related to, or how can you say that is related to information in general? Because what I'm trying to do here is just like paint the general picture of what cognitive science is before we can continue talking about why we chose it or why it drove us to it. But also, if someone is listening to it and maybe have a vague understanding of what it is or what are the problems that we're dealing with, maybe we could make it more clear as well. We can spend a little bit of time talking about it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So the fun thing about cognitive science, and I think especially what attracted you and I to each other theoretically, is that we have a very broad view of the methods and tools you can use to investigate cognition. So cognition itself seems to be a very difficult thing itself to define. It's sort of the special sauce of the human mind. but there are so many different ways that we can look at it. Anything from more physical aspects, anything from physics, chemistry, biology, to that sort of bridge of neuroscience into psychology, and then over into sociology, anthropology, and philosophy. There's so many different ways that we can try to unpack what it is that human beings are doing when we do this very complicated thing of interacting and really shaping our realities as much as our realities shape us.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't think it's necessary to go through a story of cognitive science, right? Or like
no, I think we could probably skip that. But there is a very good Wikipedia article on it.
Yeah,
I would rather go into why you really like anthropology.
Well, I like anthropology. Well, for me, it seemed before I started actually that it was the most multidisciplinary discipline. First of all, from the angle I was looking at it, so I look at the primatologists, and they call themselves anthropologists. I look at archaeologists, and they call themselves anthropologists. I look at some social psychologists, kind of calling themselves anthropologists. And so, yeah, I think, well, these guys know what they're doing, right? They are really taking all of the perspectives on the problem, and they're tackling it. They're being holistic. And I like the way that I like the third person perspective as well, or like actually the third person perspective, the first person perspective actually of like participating on the life of the people and understanding it from within. I think yeah, the thing that most attracted me was this idea of anthropology being this extremely multidisciplinary space. And the question, the reason that anthropology exists is to study, or it's presumably to study the human species at every place, at every time. So that was like, when I heard that sentence for the first time, I don't remember from where, I was just like, oh, that's what I need. So from any time, so since the first human, like the first day one human, until what's gonna happen in 1,000 years from now, from humans and anywhere on the planet to humans on Mars. So that's what attracted me. So we can explain all of those things. It's like fascinating if we can. And yeah, I saw primatologists, archaeologists, linguists, sociologists, all themselves kind of calling themselves anthropologists. So that was serious problem tackling for me.
And what did primatology offer? Maybe that gives people a good sense. Maybe they don't know why somebody might study primates in general, primates at large, when you're studying cognition.
Yeah, primates are the closest living relatives to us. So we share a lot of genetic information, so we're very similar to them genetically. But consequently, we also share a lot of ecological structures with them. So and socio-ecological structures actually. So we kind of structure our lives through the interactions with other individuals within our environment, and yeah, it's just a lot of similarities. How long time does it take to an infant to become an adult? How long time does a maternal care it's necessary for that? Sharing, learning. Well, the list is really big on similarities. So studying primates, it's a good way to go for the question of what makes us different when we have so much in common. But primates don't build cities like New York and São Paulo. So why they don't? So we look for what is different between us, especially in the case of cognition.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really interesting point of why why it's very fun to look at different species, especially our closest relatives, is when we're trying to understand the capacities that human beings have that are distinct, and especially the degree to which we are able to execute some of those faculties. It's really useful to have that comparison between an adult chimp and an adult human. And also, there are going to be differences in the types of capacities they have, but also the level of skill that they're able to achieve. And that difference between the actual primates versus, say, a human infant, which doesn't have the same capacity as a human adult, but ostensibly would end up reaching that capacity. So we can kind of build not just a developmental argument when we look at infants and infant humans and adult humans, but then also build some kind of loose framework trajectory of what course evolutionarily these capacities might have taken when we look at our closest relatives and humans, being that we're so closely related.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's important to say that etologists, primatologists, well, not primatologists as well, we look to at something called convergent evolution, and it's the idea that nature can come up with the same solutions for similar problems, not necessarily by transmitting genetic material. So it's important still to look at primates because of because of the kind of problems they have. So they have to interact in those social groups, and those are kind of like the problems that most of us have. So yeah, we just assume that nature has ways to get to the same solutions to similar problems, and not necessarily we would have to look only at primates for that. So when we are comparing with other animals, when we are comparing our behavior to other animals, we can also look for animals that have or like animals that different kind of species that have the same kind of problem, and the ways that the solutions can be achieved, and compare these kinds of solutions to the same kind of problem, so an environment. But I think that's an important point, to say that comparative psychology and etology in general, it's and in the case if you wanted to study humans and understand a little bit more what makes us different, it's not only about primates, but we can extend it for many other species.
Yeah, and I guess just to switch gears a little, one of the things that also really interests me about some of the other fields, take linguistics for example. Mm-hmm. Something that I thought I would probably be spending a bit more time in. I didn't end up going down that route, but humans are capable of a phenomenal degree of expression through language, and I think that's we're doing it right now. This very abstract, quite profound thing of being able to communicate rather precisely the breadth of thoughts that are occurring in our minds, and I think that's quite phenomenal. And as a poet, that aspect also really interested me, the ability to craft a narrative and order a sequence of images, symbols basically, and then project those symbols out into space and have them received and processed by another mind is a phenomenal thing. It's absolutely extraordinary. And so I think that's another really important aspect of trying to understand cognitive science, is these are the types of things that are investigated, the faculties which maybe to some degree are present in the rest of the biological world, but are somehow different through degree, most likely, in human beings, and how humans do it, especially with things like tool use, which I think is something very close in that it's a thought and a series of thoughts that can then be brought into the physical world. Mm-hmm. So it's something purely abstract that's occurring inside of the mind, but humans developed an ability to bring those thoughts out and shape the world around them, either through sound or through physical manipulation. And whether it's telling a story or building a tool, there's something really, I think, profound about that capacity to shape the world around us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I hear you saying, actually, I get super curious to listen to you talking a little bit more of a narrative or story crafting, because you're you spend a lot of time doing it. So, and I think that is fascinating as well. From the perspective that we build our societies by building stories, it's incredible. It's just it's a piece of us that's it's at the core, probably it's one of the core. It's one of the essence of being human. It's working our lives through stories, and I wanted to hear more you talking about it. Maybe not right now, but maybe we could even have an episode about storytelling. I think that would be cool, and I think I would enjoy a lot hearing you talking about that.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be great. And also, a poem comes to mind, which I'll maybe put a link to in whatever show notes we put up. We Are the Music Makers by Arthur O'Shaughnessy, which I think captures that really well. But also, I mean, you make music, so there's something about the oral suspension of other minds by basically manipulating the sound around them, and I think that's also very powerful.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's something in music that's is, well, we have here on our lab a music centered kind of a research center, like a music research center, right? So that's super cool. It's part of cognitive science, as an important part of our cognition as well. What do you think about the other? Well, how can we put it? Like cognitive science is a family, right? It's a family of approach, family of interests, family of perspectives. What do you think about all the other components of, like we talked a little bit about now, how language is interesting. I think I can say language is interesting for me. I like the idea of understanding how stories are built. I like the idea of understanding how stories evolve, how they, like how like how Hansel and Gretel become a Disney movie from like being told by mothers. I don't know how many, maybe 1,000 years ago. I don't know. So I'm fascinated by that. I like how language make it possible. I like to understand how language evolves as well. So, and from the anthropological side, I like symbolic anthropology. I'm fascinated by it. I already said a little bit about anthropology, and also the biological aspect of doing cognitive science. But we have other members on the family, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think what you touched upon also is an important aspect of culture, which is something a lot of animals do, but humans do, I think, to probably maybe an entirely different degree in the amount of information we're able to store about the culture itself. So the narratives end up being very fleshed out and broad, and I think that's really interesting as well. But yeah, with regard to the other aspects of cognitive psychology, I mean, everything from neuroscience to sort of cognitive elements of biology. I actually, one of the routes that I was originally on was a cognitive biology track, and I was working in a small neuroscience lab, and that was really fun. But yeah, it's interesting how everybody has preferred levels of explanation that they like to think in, and people are looking for different degrees of sort of causal explanations from, say, the more minimal units of that comprise cognition. So if you're looking at something like individual cells, or say even groups of cells, like any range of the neuroscience or biology that you might be doing, whereas sort of we focus a bit more on the psychology realm of cognition. We're sort of at the whole individual human as an agent, and so I think that we're at an interesting middle point, at least in scale, of all of the cognitive scientists, because beyond the cognitive psychology aspect, you get broader and broader collections of human beings, like the cognitive sociology and cognitive anthropology, and then beneath the human, you get all the subcomponents, the sub-agents that might be making up this one individual agent, which is basically the crux of the question. So I think that's also really interesting, is that not all cognitive scientists agree about the best methods to be using to be understanding cognition. But generally, there is some degree of appreciation of the fact that we're all trying to answer the same question. But yeah, maybe not always the case, but it's at least I know you and I tend to have a good deal of respect for people answering the question regardless. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting aspect about cognitive science, in that it spans so many different types of methods and so many different scales. And also it kind of goes from the physical realm to something like very abstract, like societies over time. I think that's a incredibly sort of nebulous and abstract idea that anthropologists have done an incredible job of making a whole great deal of sense of.
Mm. 2 questions. You were also a philosopher, so
yeah.
What's the role of philosophy in cognitive science? What's the level of explanation that philosophy tackles there? And the second, another question is, do you think I'm gonna put it a list is of the family. It's anthropology, cognitive biology, philosophy, computer science, psychology, and neuroscience. Am I missing anyone?
Yeah, I think there are probably a lot of tangential ways linguistics, but a lot of tangential ways people can also be studying cognition. But yeah, I think that's.
Do you think we understand each other at all?
Oh, I think there's a gradient of understanding for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think in gradients generally. I think there's a great quote from William James after he had experimented a bit with nitrous oxide. He said, "There are no differences, but differences of degree among different degrees of difference, and no difference." And I find that to be kind of my guiding principle in all of my science. Yeah, it's a bit of a mantra for me, because stumbling upon that, I was like, "Yep, that makes a whole lot of sense." Because there are a lot of cognitive scientists who think that there are differences of kind when we're dealing with capacities, faculties. But I tend to think that there's nothing different in kind between human cognition and non-human animal cognition. I think that everything tends to be a difference of degree. So that's sort of my investigative bias that I always apply when I'm thinking about something. But I do think that I am at the core a bit more of a philosopher than a cognitive psychologist, just because I like to deal more with the realm of theory than the realm of hypotheses. Although obviously most of my day-to-day work is, especially right now these days, is with hypothesis construction and hypothesis testing. But actually the core motivation for me is to be dealing more at the realm of theory appraisal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds something that it got stuck in my mind as well. It's just a mentor that she started one of her talks trying to provocate people. So she just asks straight away the question: what makes us different? What makes us special? Is it is a matter of quality or quantity? And then obviously the whole, like, I was still a master's student, but there was some postdocs, and the room goes like that, like, yeah, there is this. Oh no, but that it's not the case. But like, there is also this. Oh, but there is this exception, and obviously that's what she wanted to do. And
with quality and quantity here being analogous to degree and kind, respectively.
Yes, yeah, kind of, yeah. So qualitatively saying is just like, do we have something that is fundamentally different? So we have a different kind, or in quantity, or like, do we have something more? Like, do we have all the same kinds, but something more, of one kind? Like, I think that's the way to put it.
Oh, do you think that in quantity she meant more kinds?
No.
Or a difference of degree?
A difference in degree.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. But what she said after was basically something that stuck to my mind, and I kind of, that's the way that I understood. I don't remember what she said. But you can have the same ingredients and make a different recipe out of it. just change the recipe. Just put the things in different places, use them in a different way, and you just get a different cake, you know. And you don't have to have any special ingredient. You don't have to have more sugar or milk or anything like that. You just have to change the recipe, and that's stuck to my mind. That's but if what makes us different is just the recipe. We have everything else the same.
Yeah. I think that
Or the potential to have obviously there will be some things that we can call different. Obviously, we can look at it and say that's different. But I mean, I think you understood what I mean. Just
recipe wise, there can be slight differences, but I think the majority of the recipe is predominantly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a quite interesting thing, is that there's a whole aspect of the philosophical angle that looks at structure and the importance of structure, both from the biological end to the psychological end, of how from very similar ingredients you can get different outputs purely because of how everything's structured and organized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about when I say ingredients, I'm not saying basically a genetic material. I'm saying the capacities, the functions, and everything else. When we look at chimpanzees, we looked at the biggest in percentage, the biggest genetic difference between us and them is that they can smell better. They have a better they're like, when you look at their brain and the genetic material that builds the brain, or at least what we can map, right? They have a good nose. And how does that make them so different than us? Or is maybe a case of perspective that is different as well. We can make the case of the alien coming down to Earth and looking at us. Maybe, those are primates. They're all kind of this one's built cities and this one's not. In the end, they're kind of the same thing.
Yeah, that makes me think of a great book called The Naked Ape, which I think maybe you'd come across as well. It's a great book. I'm struggling to remember the name of the author, but I can try to remember, put that in the notes as well. But yeah, you said one thing. I'm going to need you to circle back because I lost the train of thought. Can you repeat what the last bit that you just said?
The alien?
Yeah. Just about the different faculties sorry, I remembered. Just aside from the sense of smell, you get really interesting things like the fact that chimpanzees have a really phenomenal working memory.
Yes.
So they can purvey more aspects of a scene very rapidly.
Yes.
And that's quite phenomenal. There's that great experiment, which of course with chimps shown a series of numbers on a screen in a particular order, and they're shown it for fractions of a second, and they're able to pick 9 digits very quickly in the order that they appeared. Mm-hmm. And humans obviously fail miserably at this. We can get maybe 3 or 4, mm-hmm. but they can get all 9, and they're shown it even for a shorter sequence of time than humans are shown, which then also...
I think they did way more than 9, actually. I think they trained one of the chimps. I remember she was doing... I don't remember now. I'm gonna guess, but it was above 14 or something. It's just an incredible working memory.
Yeah. And that reminds me of a good paper from Andrew Nagel, the philosopher. What is it like to be a bat? Mm-hmm. Where he kind of works through the idea of trying to understand what it is like to experience the consciousness of another animal, and working through how difficult, if not impossible, that might be. So I think that's also quite a fun exercise. Of it's so difficult to put yourself into the mind of an animal that has completely, maybe completely, but maybe just a difference of degree, different faculties or heightened or diminished senses from what we experience.
Yeah, I completely subscribe to that. I think my take is that we think we're very special but we're very good at the things that we are good at, right? So we grow up in a human society that where we have to do things, and if we do that well, we call ourselves intelligent. But yeah, you compare yourself to the chimp on the woods, you're not. You're dumb.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say like that, but I'm talking from the point of like, what are the explanations for this work, for the memory on the primates? It's just like, yeah, imagine that you have to jump from one tree to the other, and there's all these brains around. So if you can remember the pathway that you need to take by remembering kind of like, oh, this branch is over here, that one is over there, so you just like navigate easily. So we could never do that. Like,
yeah, I think it's also this very rapid ability to sample the visual environment,
yeah,
which we are really not able to do anywhere near as well.
Yeah.
And it's I think that a lot of the caloric usage of the brain got used up for other things that are way more necessary for us than sampling a whole wide range of the visual environment.
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously only a limited number of things that we can do, only a limited number of limited amount of energy that the brain could be using at any given moment. And I think it was probably more useful to be spending that energy on other faculties than being able to notice 14 distinct things every 100 microseconds, 100 milliseconds. So that's actually quite interesting as well.
And in another take, what do you think about the branch of computer science, and how does it can be related to cognitive science in general, but also our work or our interests on cognitive science?
Yeah, I think the pursuit of cognitive science is a really interesting one, because there are two ways where human beings could experience an entity. I suppose a third way as well, where human beings can experience an entity which is, say, at the capable of the same degree of cognition that humans are capable of. One would be that somehow spontaneously, bonobos would reach a heightened level of cognition, and then all of a sudden we'd have a different species that is as capable as humans, but long shot. The other one, equally long shot, is that aliens come down and they have high cognitive capacities. I'm not putting my money on either one of those, but the third option is that we actually create one, that our sort of intellectual progeny, the artificial intelligence, is capable of either having or mimicking to a high degree of fidelity the type of cognition that we are capable of, in which case we'd have the ability to interact with a form of life which is vastly different from us, but also to some degree our intellectual equal. And I think that's a profound experiment. And that's sort of the long view philosophical take on computer science, of course. The immediate thing is much more at the micro scale of trying to mimic some of the things that we see in humans, and there are sort of two ways to go about that. One is actually mimicking the structure of the mind and, say, the nervous system as a whole to produce an output. And the other one is not necessarily mimicking any of the structure, but trying to generate the same output that we see in humans. And there are infinite number of subdivisions between those and people's computer scientists' perspectives on what might be the most useful. But I think it is a really interesting endeavor. I don't know if it tells us about cognition as much as it tells us about how to mimic cognition, which of course is an element of understanding cognition itself, but it's not a direct application of understanding what it is human beings do. Although, of course, there's a whole element of computer science, which is the robotics sort of subdivision, which is also really interesting. And these are all really phenomenally interesting attempts that have a lot to tell us about how we function and how we learn.
I think there is a point of a turning point on computer science, which is very young as well. That is the bridging between this synthetic intelligence, which is can be considered natural intelligence as well, obviously. Or in the case of robotic, the synthetic materials and humans, and we have no idea where they're gonna go yet, right? So, and that's pretty young, and maybe we could find answers on a near future or in a distant one, but we have to keep in mind that how young it is, and
Yeah, and also we're at a really interesting time where literally in the last year or two, there are tools out there, language models that are able to really mimic a lot of human output and are able to parse text and generate text that is able to interpret very sort of complex language and then produce phenomenal output. So I think those language models are very interesting in that they would probably fool a lot of people in terms of whether or not they're talking to an actual person.
mm-hmm.
And on the other side, there are an incredible amount of incredible advancements in the ability to integrate technology and chips to work in tandem with the nervous system
Mm-hmm.
to be able to build robotic arms, rebuild parts of the spinal cord to allow people to walk. I mean, there are incredible advancements, and one is sort of the idea of getting closer to generating something that can mimic cognition, and the other one is the science of trying to integrate technology into human beings rather than creating something separate
Mm-hmm.
and creating something novel.
I think the second one is much more interesting for me.
Yeah, I guess it depends how far it gets. I mean, if we create an artificial general intelligence, then that's incredibly interesting. I don't know if that's possible, but I think the second one, the one of integrating technology into the human, just the individual human agent, I think that's really interesting because we know that there are going to be improvements there regardless,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the artificial general intelligence is still a theoretical concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I focus I try to not to, but I end up being drawn to the aspect that is it's mimicking it, and the fact that you can program programs to program themselves, but someone has to program the program to program themselves at first place. It's always a product of us. Any kind of intelligence that we can produce, it's a product of us.
Well,
or not.
I suppose there's a point at which they're going to be able to generate wholly new systems on their own, and that's like, is your grandchild your child? And there you'd have to say, yeah, it shares some of your genetic makeup, but there are other elements of it that make it distinct. And I think that any sufficiently complex system that is created by a system that we create is going to be like that. It's going to be novel in that sense. It's going to have our DNA in it.
It sounds a lot like incest or
Incest.
Yeah, because what you're saying is just like we give birth
Yes.
to this intelligence which
Yes.
looks like us.
Yes.
And then
Like regular reproduction.
yes.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna breed with them, with this
No.
intelligence,
Oh,
to create something else which is it's our grandchild, but it can only be born out of our interactions with our child.
oh no. Yeah, I don't think
okay,
that's the case.
Maybe I drift away now, but
Yeah. I don't think that's actually the case. I think that very soon we're going to build something that on its own builds something new.
yeah.
So in that sense, you're not needed. It's sort of like you build something, and then that on its own has the ability to reproduce.
Yeah, that's what I
that's
lost.
Basically what's
That's
happening.
what I lost. Yeah, but yeah. No, I see your point.
Yeah, and then from then on, it's a sort of a entertaining philosophical exercise to think about what would happen next. But yeah, it's I think a long way away. But for now, they're very interesting tools, especially using something like GPT to actually conduct experiments to see what would happen as people interact with GPT, or using it to construct novel stimuli. I think that there's an incredible, it provides scientists who are constructing experiments a whole new set of tools to access, and potentially makes science a bit more efficient, especially with things like statistical analysis as well. So I think that integration of such a powerful tool into our everyday use as scientists, I think, is on its own really really profound, because it's already going to seriously influence the progression of human ideas.
I have to tell you that in the past months I have been incredibly frustrated with ChatGPT. Incredibly. You have no idea.
Oh man, have you been using GPT-4?
No, I haven't.
That's the way to go.
Yeah, I'm gonna try it out, because the 3.5 is just like, it's extremely frustrating.
There was a point where I was trying to get it to generate something for me, and it was almost like a Faustian deal, where everything, I would list out a set of what I wanted, a set of things that I wanted, and it would manage to always generate those plus one thing that I didn't ask for. And every time I tried to outright the possible things that it could think of that were different, it managed to produce yet still something which had a novel element which I didn't want. And so that's also really interesting, is that I couldn't outthink GPT-4 in terms of trying to predict the elements it would include to fuck up what I was trying to do. And so that was incredibly frustrating, but also very entertaining.
But yeah, I'm gonna try the 4. I didn't. What I'm using it for, it's and basically it's for repetitive tasks. So if I have a long task, like a changing, like, I don't know. The other day I had like many citations in a long note, and I wanted to add something to the citations, and so I just put it there and asked it, just add this thing in this kind of format. So kind of I could do with regex as well, sort of, but it would be very demanding and very complicated, and very would just like take me more time. So I use ChatGPT, sometimes generating a plot in R, so I don't have to look for how do I change something that is really small in a plot, but I just put it there and I get in a second. But I have been really frustrated with how I deal with logics, because what I get out of the 3.5, it's trying to convince me all the time. The text is just trying to convince me. Like, it's just a convincing text. It's not. It doesn't work with like it breaks down very, very, very often on very simple logic aspects of the text. And I think there was a study 2 months ago, and I believe that it might have been the GPT-4, which it got wrong 55% of coding elements and structures. So they just like give these questions with coding, and it was more than half wrong.
Yeah, I think that the important thing to keep in mind with anything like this is that it's drawing on existing text. So it doesn't have a computational capacity. It doesn't have a mathematics engine. It is only producing language. And that's quite an important aspect. And there are people that are doing this. A buddy of mine has integrated a mathematics engine along with a language model, and what you're able to do is ask it very, very complex questions of chemistry, math, physics, and it's able to guide you through all of the calculations. And it's actually doing the calculations on the back end, unlike something like a regular language model, which is publicly available.
Yeah, probably that's the way to go, because I didn't try, but there's something called Copilot as well that is specifically for coding. So you should be better on that direction. So yeah, if we're striving for general intelligence, you would have to combine all of those.
You would have to combine all that. Yeah, and it's interesting to see, and I know of some folks trying to do this at a lab over in Germany, which is trying to integrate language models and also sort of robotic elements. So you can
Mm.
actually tell to do things and it'll change modes and say, okay, well, this is a question I need to answer with language, or this is a question I need to answer by moving my robotic arm. And so that's quite impressive. And I think that there are slow integrations of these different faculties, which are very good. Obviously, we built a program that could beat the chess masters back in '96, and then I guess in 2018 also beat the Go masters at the game Go. So that there are incredibly powerful computers capable of logic, and there are incredibly powerful, obviously, computing capacities for mathematics. Language is sort of the new aspect, and now once you include robotics, then you have this very interesting thinking machine. You have things like companies like Boston Dynamics, which obviously have, for better or worse, maybe for worse, but not sure. Definitely amazing scientific achievements. But the closeness to the military industrial complex is always a very concerning thing. But their advancements in robotics are really, really exceptional. What the robots are able to do, their ability to process information from the environment and then produce very complex and novel outputs. What basically emerges as an awareness of their components of their body and an integration of the information from their environments to best achieve an outcome. I think that is simultaneously incredibly impressive and also, frankly, quite terrifying.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we can come back a little bit more to the things that relate us to cognitive science. So the questions that we're trying to answer. We can also talk a little bit about of being political beings, because we are, right, and tell a little bit more of how we see life, how we see society, and what we expected to get out of being a cognitive scientist. And you can say what kind of questions do you want to answer, what kind of problems do you want to solve.
Yeah. So for me, the most interesting thing is how identity emerges. And when I was getting into cognitive science, one of the question that I thought I would be working on is memory. And so that's what I was interested in with doing sort of the cognitive biology stuff and the cognitive psychology is working particularly on memory processes, because I had this idea, which it still is very interesting to me, which is that if the memory goes, everything about you that makes you you as a social being also disappears.
Mm-hmm.
So the body can be there and people can see your body and call up the idea of the person you were, but you in the present moment is functionally dead. And so that to me is quite an interesting thing. And when I started studying memory, I remember early on my advisor, Ayşe Can Bodoroğlu, who's was in Boğaziçi University, now she's in Koç University in Istanbul. Phenomenal researcher on memory. And she had said something when we were talking about memory, because there's so many different ways you can define a memory. And when I asked her outright, just how do you define memory? She skipped all of the other things that you could say that, maybe mean something, maybe don't mean something. And she said, memory is mutable. And that stuck with me. That because out of all the things she could have said, the only word she cared to say, aside from all of the obvious things about memory that you could say, all the slight different ways you could describe it, just sticking with memory is mutable to me was kind of revelation, because I'd been seeing that in the literature, but I hadn't just been thinking about memory just as a mutable capacity. And it's one of, say, the typical pillars of cognitive psychology, aside with memory, aside from perception and attention and all these other things. But I came to start to view memory purely as a subset of beliefs because of how relative they are. They're two different people can recall different aspects of an event, and neither can be close to, even if there is a truth, even close to what the truth was of the event. Meaning their accuracy can diverge quite greatly, and also the accuracy can diverge quite greatly over time in the same individual. I can remember one thing about an event one day, and then the day after remember it slightly differently. So I think that is why I started looking at memory purely as beliefs, because I see it purely as information that is stored, and information that is stored about other information, which is essentially how I define a belief in the first place. So that was why I shifted from memory research to research on beliefs and belief dynamics, and looking at basically everything as information, sort of on a very broad philosophical scale. If it is, then it has some quantity of information. It is quantifiable to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at that, I started viewing identity itself as this sort of hierarchy of beliefs that we maintain, with something that's more prioritized to the individual, being a belief that's more propagated throughout the system, more likely to occur as the information is interacted with. So that's basically the sort of theoretical overview of what I work on and why I think the philosophical aspect is so important. But in the sort of practical aspect, what that means is looking at things like how people interact with information, how information changes their beliefs, and how they search for information in spaces, particularly how the context of the information and their social context that they're in change how they will search for, interact with, and perceive information.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, and maybe it would be nice to hear an overview of where you're at.
Yeah, I think, well, kind of things that I'm interested on, it reflects a little bit how I approach them interdisciplinarily. So the problems are also, the problem is probably on the overlap between different interests that I have. So I'm interested in how people solve problems. So, and I take the perspective that probably the most important aspect of our environment are other individuals or other minds. Obviously, there's oxygen and other things and in our environment that are very important for our survival. But I think humans have evolved to be this hypersocial being, and in order to solve problems that lead us to think a little bit further on evolutionary problems. So how the tools that we use to solve problems get selected, and the fact of being hypersocial leads me to the questions regarding how we deal with other minds. So those are the kind of problems that I would like to look at. So how we manifest other minds inside of our minds, how we use this manifestation to solve the problems that we have that we encounter in our environment. And that might seem a little bit broad, because it is, and it will be touching from, as I said, from evolutionary psychology to cultural evolution. So there are all these tools that we use to solve problems, and we live in hypersocial environments, and we have to somehow, with our cognitive capacities, solve efficiently those problems by representing other minds. It's probably how we have been doing it throughout our evolutionary process. In a nutshell, I think that's about it. So yeah, you can.
Yeah, I think that's the fun part of where our two works meet. Is I focus on essentially a very, very similar set of things, but I try to focus purely on what's going on the inside of the individual, while taking account basically that the context is, especially inclusive of other people, is probably one of the most important things guiding what goes on internally with the individual. But I try to focus on the mechanisms purely contained inside, and you focus just one step beyond that, of kind of more of the contextual factors and what happens when more people are interacting. So that, I think that ends up being sort of a really fun way to encompass both what's happening in the individual's mind when they are interacting with people, and then what's happening more with the people at large when they are interacting.
Yeah, in summary, yeah, I'm looking from top down, just like I look how what are the different structures that exist, and then I will reduce it until I get to how the individual is dealing with those structures, and you are dealing with what are the processes that are within the individual, and what kind of product that does it bring up, and what kind of structure could it bring up, like what kind of like dynamics between like myself and yourself later on. And so we were just like looking the same problem from different sides of it, and we are looking at the same thing in the middle in the end. But yeah, I see it that way as well.
Yeah, and should we shift over to something like probably the first real conversation we had maybe 13 months ago?
Wow.
Right? I mean, the more towards our lives outside of academia, and some of the biggest things that drive us outside is there's a huge overlap in our interests in not keeping both not keeping the advancements of science within the realm of science, kind of promoting, what science, like any other industry or discipline or endeavor that humans undertake, can be applied to bettering society at large. But then also how important it is to apply that to, say, the mechanism that somehow guides society itself, which is the whole realm of politics.
Yeah, I don't like to be politically neutral. I like to be political. I think that's an important aspect. I think when people try, we already said that to each other, that if you try to do not take a stand, you are taking a stand, and that's obvious. You just have to look at the context on which you're not taking a stand, because you're maintaining the status quo if you do not. And from that side, I think like by looking at the relationship between the mind and the social structure, what I hope to contribute, well, that's we're talking about something that's it's not a PhD thesis, right? It's not my soon to realize practical objective of producing something immediately, or I'm talking about kind of like idealist perspective. Yeah, that's what I should have said. So I think I could contribute to our understanding of how to explain the relationship between an individual's mind and the social structure where we live. Because what bothers me the most is just we look at the world, we look at and for most well that you are in your life, I think it's impossible that you're going to find someone on the planet and you're going to say, hey, do you think the things are going just fine? Obviously going to have like Steven Pinker and say, well, or others, right? Like, we're better than ever, and that's awesome. We should be like so happy about that. And okay, we're better than before. Should therefore we be happy? I think not necessarily. And one of the things that bothered me the most, it's basically that we are capable of doing so much with science and solving so many different kinds of problems, like putting the person in a rock, like of very far away from us, like and we do not think that we do have the same capacity that with science we solve the problem of how we should organize ourselves. So I think my contribution could be to understand what's the relationship between the individual mind and the structures where we live in, to understand how would be the better way to live together, to produce together, to have a fulfilling life, to be as fair as we can be within our own moral constructs. I think if we don't try, that's really it's just strange if we don't try. It's just odd. So I rather try. I just want to try. I want to try to find the. I hope that the questions that I pursue with my research will lead me to better answers in that direction.
Yeah, right on. I think, yeah, like you said, there's a lot to appreciate about the long arc of human progress and the point that we're at now, and how much human beings have been able to achieve, but that by no means ought to make us complacent with the status quo, because there are so many people that aren't enjoying. I'd say a majority of people aren't enjoying a significant enough share of that progress, and in fact, for many people, that progress is built upon their exploitation. So that ends up being a big driving factor for me. And
but statistically, they should be happy.
Statistically, maybe. I mean, there's no way to quantify that. Statistically, maybe they are slightly better off than they were. But I think that's, at that point is irrelevant, because there's nothing that is near sufficient in terms of the average quality of life. While the average quality of life might have improved, it is far away yet from anything we might consider sufficiently good enough. And I think that so for me, one of the maybe the two things that cognitive science offers, particularly with my work, one is looking at and making clear the ways that attention and the perception of information and our individual beliefs are updated, and basically how predictable all of that is. Because there are so many ways that individuals are taken advantage of by existing systems, which haven't necessarily been rigorously tested in scientific protocols, which I think we can make clear. And maybe, I guess in my mind, one aspect of it is equipping people with the knowledge of how their behavior is predictable and how their behavior is manipulated. And that is definitely one aspect of it. And the other is making a case which is a bit more overtly policy oriented, which is that the individual capacity to function at a high level for their own benefit, not in terms of some kind of productivity output, but function in a way where they are happy and able to take care of their own needs, is contingent upon the context that they're in, and that contextual relevance to people's both affective states and cognitive states is really important for me to sort of build in and argue for in the research, which is why I think cases like higher programs of social welfare are critical, not just from a sort of political standpoint, but even though it's a little less important to me, but also the economic standpoint, but then also the sort of ethical standpoint of why it's important to build systems wherein individuals aren't able to exploit, and that the majority, if not every single individual, has access to systems provided by any system of government that they live under, which provides for their welfare.
Yeah, I think I see. I share of your perspective. Although I think I might, I don't know, I may be even a little bit more cynical and pragmatic on that. Like I think it's just stupid that we don't strive to to make a better society with science. It's just plainly stupid. It's just like, um, hearing that, well, capitalism is the best thing, the best social system that we could ever had, or that we ever had, is not the same that saying that it is the best that we could ever had. So so we should just like look for something better always, and it's just stupid that we don't.
Yeah, I think the it as stupid as it is that we don't use science to better society, it's, I think, heartbreaking that we don't use every industry to better society. I think
Yeah.
that just that yeah, it's sort of it's an interesting thing that we've had successive series of systems which have evolved, which are at least in theory radically different from one another, and that is also very interesting. And that the system that we live under now, capitalism, and some people are even arguing that with the advent of the internet, that capitalism as such has died and sort of made way for an entirely new thing. I'm thinking of, say, notions of techno-feudalism from Yanis Varoufakis and the like. But when the idea that everything could be commodified, that individuals' time and things like the quality of air and trees and individual creativity and expression could be commodified and turned into capital, was an inherently appealing idea to people, because then there could be equal exchanges of value in theory. But what that allowed is, of course, for the devaluation of everything which humans are capable of doing, which doesn't have a direct economic output. And so that problem of converting everything to capital opened up a huge set of issues in terms of how we are able to exploit individuals rather than improving the everyday lives of individuals.
Yeah, it's just talking about productivity. It's just like, it also a concern of mine that people that would be pro status quo would just go with the saying that that's the system that we have in place, foster competition, which fosters increase in production, increase on productivity, and that's why we would have actually science, university, technology, the things. So I think that's one of the problems that I would like to personally tackle, because I don't think we need a system like that. And obviously, you mentioned Varoufakis, and when I'm saying here capitalism, it's a gross simplification of what the system is. It's much more complex than that, and we have like many different nuances and many different kind of dynamics going on in the entire world and locally. So it's a gross simplification calling it. But I think with my current research, for example, where I'm looking in on how social hierarchies are built, or some kind of social hierarchies are built, I also look on how these structures enable efficient production. So I think it's important. I think we should strive to improve and to produce more efficiently, not just more, just like and I don't think we need the kind of like, coming back to some arguments about competition, we don't need the kind of system that we have right now in order to do so. If we look at the scientific evidence on how we can predict what's the best way to organize a social structure for the productivity. So we first have to look a little bit deeper on that. We have to look and what are the psychological processes put in place to enable people to cooperate and coordinate before we make the assumption that the system that we have is the best in order to do so, because I think the way the things are going, we are actually proven that that's actually not the case, right? Like we're talking about the chains of production and transportation of food around the world, which are stupidly inefficient. We're talking about the degradation of natural resources, which are another kind of stupidity that we cannot afford. Like, we can definitely do better. We just can do better. We just can. So that's something that concerns me in case of talking about how to produce better, more efficiently. And it's not so when I'm talking from my political perspective, I'm not talking about this kind of I don't know, kind of a Captain Fantastic on the woods, living off grid, or like, the kind of like alternative societies kind of stuff. I'm talking about real things that we can do with the people around us, and that actually makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main things that we get from technological advancement as well, is that we can plan things more efficiently, and we don't necessarily need to depend as much on individuals implementing what we think is the most efficient, or what they have individually calculated as most efficient. And obviously there's a whole bunch of problems with relying too much on artificial intelligence to do that planning. But I think that it is at least a step in a direction where, while there are biases in any system of artificial intelligence, it might be better at mitigating some of the biases that individuals have. And I do think that and we've spoken about this before, but I do think that competition has its place. But I think that our incentives for competition are misaligned and flawed really from the onset. Instead of something like achievement or prestige or any other thing that individuals might get from competition, which is basically how all of science functions. I mean, sometimes obviously there are some scientists that make more money than others, but you don't go into science to make money. But it does have an element of competition, and I think that is a good way to sort of mimic that in what we see as industry. Maybe obviously not the sort of a capital-centric industry, but something where we are able to continue to be ingenious as human beings. And that's sort of the funny argument, tying financial reward to competition and innovation. It's so flawed, because all of human history is around the innate drive to discover. And I think that's sort of also at the heart of true competition, of the like that we have in the arts and the sciences, as opposed to this more rotten style competition that we have in markets, where individuals are just competing in order to produce something for capital, which means that a majority of what's produced is of little value at all. It's just what can be sold. And right now we're in an age where what is marketed to be better is more important than what actually is better. And that if nothing else, shows the inherent flaw in the idea of competition with monetary reward. But I think that there's another important aspect which you mentioned, things like shipping things around the world, is that we need to solve this one really interesting problem. And I don't know how to solve it, but I think it's an interesting place to start, is that the nation state, which is fundamentally a new concept, allows for a high degree of localization, with for the large part, especially in heterogeneous societies, a little care for ideological convergence. So there's sort of low convergence in ideology, but high convergence in location, because there are physical boundaries. And the way nations try to mitigate that is by creating the idea of this sort of nationalist narrative. Of course, it gives one idea that everybody shares, which is inherently meaningless, which is the strangest thing, how it's taken off. Everything from a national flag, which is also a ridiculous concept, to a national anthem, which is an insult to any, I think, human being. A set of words through which you can relay your emotions about a narrative about a nation. It just seems so deranged. So when we look at these two dimensions, which can sort of, if we plot them against each other, there are differences of degree to which we can look at distance in location, and we can look at distance in ideology. And I think there's a very interesting thing to play with there, where we can have slightly less localized systems that we try to build, which have a slightly greater degree of ideological similarity. And there we might be able to at least get to a degree where we are able to accommodate individuals experimenting with different types of governance and systems, so that we don't try to impose something on individuals who feel like it's a system might not be right for them. With something like, I suppose, a bit of the optimism there that the systems that are put in of the type that we think are more valuable will eventually build better societies. So there's something there. And another thing that we talk about a lot is sort of the gradient with idealism at one end and pragmatism at the other end, and how it's important not to be at either end, because every step you take from idealism to pragmatism, you make some sacrifice of ideal. And I think it's really important to understand what that sacrifice is. And if we quantify the sacrifices we make in our attempt to be pragmatic, then I think it makes our pragmatism more effective and also gives it a direction.
No, I completely agree with everything that you said. I think the fact that we believe the nations actually exist, it is together with a lot of, with another set of beliefs which are on the basis of the society that we live in. So not only nations, but also religions, and what do we believe that, like, races are, all of those things in our imagination. But yeah, they are deeply ingrained on every single human. And yeah, obviously this kind of thing also makes me think and push me away from the idealist side of but I what I have been thinking mostly and most recently, it's actually maybe not most recently, but like more often, it's when I was talking about production, and was actually not exactly about the self-governance, or like the kind of governance that you would see as implemented on a kind of like nation state, but on the level of production. So like coming back to the basics, and looking at the places like Mondragon in Spain, when you have like this huge complex with many different kind of factories, and basically a whole industry on a city, where the decision power on the production side, it's not entirely horizontal. So you have hierarchical structures going on those places, which are kind of constrained by a set of rules that everybody just willingly accept them, because they're working and they produce. They still make good surplus on their production, and the people who participates on this social system, on this structure, they fare well, they do well. So I think I would when I'm talking about those things, I'm thinking more about starting with the self-organization and the production side, and that's why I also said about productivity, because some of the things when I say about pragmatism, it's also on the aspect of people need to find the solutions for the things that they need to solve on the day-to-day life. So if you're trying to implement a different kind of social system in a nation state, you're just like messing things around, because people don't need this solution for that problem. Like, that's not the problem. Like, the problem of the nation for most of the people, I believe, is not the kind of the daily problem that they have to face. I have to deal with, like, obviously you're going to be dealing with problems that are related to the governance, or like, I don't know, but it's not the thing that you go with your daily basis that you have to worry that, like, okay, this system, like, obviously it's on the discourse, because people rationalize, yeah, things are bad because things are like this or like that, but actually you need to get faster to work, or you need a comfortable way to get to work, or you need a better you need localized things. You need to deal with the problems in your daily life, and I think dealing with the production with the people that you are actually sharing the environment and sharing the means of production with them, it's a better way to put it, instead of like, yeah, no, we have to change the system from the top. No, we change it from the bottom by tackling the problems that you need to solve.
Yeah, I think that the idea of the nation state emerged from sort of the feudal systems that we had of monarchs, empires, and all that happened was that a slightly larger group of people, just in number, were allowed to be part of the ruling class. And that's basically all that we got in the transition from the traditional sort of empire to the current form of nation state, is that all it did was maintain power to a tightly held group of people, which then corporations were able to capitalize on. And that's all that a strong central government allows us. But really, we don't need anything like that, because humans are capable of solving incredibly complex problems at a very local level. And we've devalued local politics, which is at the heart of it what is going to affect everybody's day-to-day lives. Mm-hmm. And we've relegated that power and that enormous responsibility to a small set of individuals who are effectively disconnected from the large amount of people which they preside over. And for that reason, we've allowed narratives which have nothing to do with most people's everyday lives take control over how they view political systems. And this is really important when we look at even dismantling systems of systemic injustice, because the systems of injustice that are the most effective at disenfranchising folks are top-down systems, whereas systems which are highly localized, innately, groups which are disenfranchised from national governments have been able to thrive at local levels as long as the government doesn't step in and fuck everything up.
Yeah, I have to be a little bit fair here, because what I meant that the nation state is not the problem of the daily life. It's not exactly the case. I mean, maybe it's the ideal case that you don't have to worry about a war that you didn't start, or you don't have to worry about a law that you didn't voted for, or you didn't, that's what I meant. But obviously people suffer with the decisions taken from the top. That's just to make it clear that that's what I meant, and not the.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted it, but it's good to clarify for everybody listening as well. And I guess one other thing that I just wanted to point out, which I know you agree with, but also for anybody listening, is when we devalue things like the nation state and ideas of race, nationality, things like that, it's also a completely different thing to talk about something like culture, which is sort of a practice of collective art. It is this phenomenal thing that human beings are able to do, which is build a system of narratives and styles of speaking, thinking, eating, dressing, producing anything abstract like sort of art in the individual sense, and carrying that across generations. And I think that that's a phenomenally beautiful thing, and really shapes a lot of how we think and behave, things that we are a product of, which is also why. I guess at the beginning of the episode, you mentioned that you're Brazilian. I mentioned that I'm ethnically Armenian, because of how it just shapes us, and not the things that we value over other things necessarily, but just the elements of sort of the human anthropological ancestry that we are individually custodians of. You as a sort of custodian of Brazilian culture, myself as a custodian of Armenian culture, particularly diasporic Armenian culture, is a beautiful thing to be celebrated and not lumped in with and conflated for the idea of the nation state, which is completely bereft of meaning and value as opposed to what culture offers us.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. I think it's actually they can be very conflicting most of the times. Actually, like,
yeah, yes, they can even conflict with each. Aside from being conflated for each other, they can also directly conflict with one another.
Definitely, like you can have you can have the idea of what. Like, yeah, obviously, I say I'm Brazilian, and I'm there is meaning on what I'm saying. There is an intention what the reason I'm even mentioning it. But I also mentioned my neighborhood, for example, which is it's much more telling of myself than being Brazilian itself. Like, basically, what I said is that I came from this neighborhood. This neighborhood happens to be in São Paulo. That happens to be in Brazil. So I wouldn't, like, if I just said, yes, I'm Brazilian, like, yeah, what's the general information contained in this statement? It's just like, yeah, well, the stereotype of being a Brazilian. But no, I came from a really poor neighborhood and the south side of São Paulo, and that tells me much more about how I am culturally built.
Yeah, I totally get that. Give us the name of the neighborhood.
Grajaú.
There you go. And also, yeah, that's why I also really strongly sort of identify with the portion of my upbringing that was in Queens, is because I feel like those are the emotions that are the memories that are most salient, because of what I experienced there, and really my worldview of a lot of things, of really experiencing this very multicultural place, which is very different from not only other places in New York, but also almost a different, completely different cultural style from many of the other places, most of the other places in the United States. And so it's very interesting and also very telling that even the elements of the culture that we maintain are localized. Mm-hmm. That there are strong local elements to the culture and the things that we value, which not to speak against anything like large scale human endeavors, but really speaks to the value of local interactions between human beings.
Yeah, and I think we probably, all of us, kind of we have been here talking about the nation state as if it is the social construct that it is, but we have been talking about it as if we are a part of it, but we are definitely completely ingrained, kind of like entangled with it, because we end up being, that's all because we are made believe, right? We're that happens to be. There is a fact also that we are in a world where, well, we, like me and you, for example, we have been traveling, so that changed the perspective of like this imaginary, the cultural imaginary on people's heads. Like if you have been living in the same place, which is like maybe a small place in the countryside or any country, and you live your entire life there. You're gonna get this culturally localized imagination and what people do, like the way that people do what they do. How should I think about the word? What are the perspectives I should have, and so on. And then when you start to traveling a little bit, and then you go out, maybe you end up being confronted with the nation state again. So yeah, I go to Ireland, and then I am more Brazilian than when I was in Brazil. I just end up being, because but yeah, just to mention that I at least I can say it for myself, that I might say something sometimes as disconnected or putting me a part of it, but I make no I make no I won't make any effort to say that I am as an average person as everybody else. So I'm not a superhuman being that I can understand those things. I cannot be entirely a part of those things.
Yeah, you mean a part of those things, or entirely apart from those things?
Entirely apart from those things.
Yeah. It definitely, it makes sense that, or it's fitting that we're both expats. We're both expatriates. In that there's a large element of the things that we both criticize that we can both empathize with feeling and siding with. It's not like during the course of my education that I never felt things like patriotism or things like that as a youth. But I think it's just a testament for read more books, travel to more places, and it doesn't matter. Like, check out some fiction and check out your local, your neighboring neighborhood. Even it doesn't need to be a plane flight or something fancy, but it's necessary to incorporate as many different aspects of the human experience as possible in order to gain the perspective of empathy.
Yeah, for sure. Like I also I probably had problems during my teenagehood to not be patriot. I think I mentioned some stories to you of having to sing the anthem or something like that, and I was just I can tell more about my teenagerhood, but that would take a lot of time. But I think the thing that I was like, it's like, obviously the thing that I want to say is it's different degrees.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can be a nationalist in terms of defending Brazilian food, which I think is awesome.
Hey, culture. I lump that under culture. So
if you compare to other foods, I would defend it. I would say no, it's good food. So I don't have to defend a flag or anthem, but I think the food is
the food and the music is not part of the nation. The nation doesn't get to claim that. That's purely a cultural artifact. Yeah.
Definitely. But it's definitely like anything that is cultural can be hijacked.
Yeah, purely hijacked. I mean, the nation state has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, But that's what the building of the construct of the nation state does.
Exactly.
It takes everything that can be remotely seen as a value, maybe localized, maybe more or less localized, and just say that's what defines you, and that's why you're better than the other nation.
Yeah, and it also creates divides between individuals that have shared cultures for generations.
Yeah, definitely.
Purely by drawing a line.
Exactly.
I mean, there's so many people that share adjacent cultures, but say, oh no, this food is from this country, this food is from this country. But really, of course, it was one region before a line was drawn in between them.
Exactly.
And it also sort of perpetuates this great myth that whenever a territory or an empire has taken over a plot of land, that all of a sudden those individuals in the new plot of land are part of that territory. Mm-hmm. It's not like during Rome's expansion that more Romans were created.
Mhm.
It was just individuals who had to pay taxes to a small group of people in Rome.
Mhm.
And it's the same thing of many countries' expansions and territories they are, from, I guess, both the country that you're from and the country that I'm from have histories of genocide against indigenous peoples.
Mhm.
And there's by no way a Brazilianification or an Americanification of the individuals who are on those lands who have an entirely different culture. Just because the nation and the flag that owns basically the land that they're on it doesn't get to dictate what and who they are.
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree with you. Yeah. I b- I start just think about a list of things that people could just have a self identity and being hijacked as a kind of like nation identity. Um, I think yeah, we're seeing the case for religion very often of drawing divides when they should not.
Yeah,
Like, there's no reason.
I guess we can have a whole other episode on tribalism, which might actually
Yes,
be really
yes.
really fun
Yeah.
to do, especially with a lot of the research that both of us do.
I think to like during this episode where like we kind of we have been painting the picture of what we expect this interaction to be, or this like the podcast in itself to be. We started with evolution and comparing us to other animals. We passed through many different aspects of cognitive science, many different perspectives from different disciplines. We talked about artificial intelligence, and then we end up in politics by talking about the construction of the nation state. And there was a lot of things between. And a lot of things between, probably like maybe half of it was very personal from me and you. Probably we probably we said like we told a couple stories about ourselves, and we also put very clear what our perspectives on topics here. So I think we have been doing a good job on this first one by painting a picture on how I think it's gonna look like the next episode, right? We just covering a really broad range of topics, putting our ideas on it, a little bit of our knowledge of what we know about those things, relating a little bit of it with the work that we've been doing, and being multidisciplinary, looking at things from different perspectives, and being ourselves, telling our stories. And I think that sounds like a map.
Yeah, exactly. I think we can probably wrap it up right there. I mean, we'll things to expect are maybe slightly more narrow topics of conversation going forward, and a bit more of the literature that maybe we work with, and then the perspectives that engenders in each of us.
Yeah, probably every single minute of this conversation could generate an entire episode in itself.
Yeah. We'll have to use a language model to parse out all the topics, and then we'll have a good list.
Yeah, that's true. We can try it out too. We can try with GPT-4. Though.
Yeah.
I think what I wanted to say is just that everything that at least from my perspective, that I have been saying here, I got the feeling now in the end that it was very superficial.
Yeah.
And I didn't want it to have this feeling. It's like I don't like to be left hang with the feeling that I could have said more about something if I would have the time for it. But
there's more to come.
But yeah,
it's a good precursor.
So but that's the idea, right? That's everything that we said, we're gonna give more attention and talk more about them.
Yeah,
and other things.
And we will definitely work to have more detailed show notes with links to the evidence as to why we hold particular opinions, both in sort of academic literature and also in sort of popular texts, and potentially some historical context, so that you don't think that we are taking any of the things that we say for granted, and that we provide adequate justification for any of the claims that we might make.
Yeah, definitely. What about having?
Oh yeah, and potentially also having some guests. And potentially a bit more direct reference to some texts, which reminds me, maybe something I'll mention a bit more often are things like A History of Equality by Thomas Piketty, who I was thinking of when we were talking about the ever optimist who you referenced before.
Steven Pinker.
Yeah, thank you, Pinker. Who's I think a good pragmatic realist alternative to the works of people like Pinker. Thomas Piketty's History of Equality is really a fantastic text. So we'll dive into more fun things like that, and hopefully also provide a good list of resources to dive into, aside from the individuals that we might have on that in themselves are great resources of information.
Definitely. More than just being here talking out of our heads stuff. I think the primary objective would be like to actually enable people to make their own conclusions about those topics. So to do that, we're gonna definitely make it material available for you to do not take anything for granted that either of us are saying, or anyone else actually.
Keep listening and you will be equipped with everything that we find valuable and we feel has equipped us to think about society and the human condition through the lens of cognitive science.
Cool.